Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. A very warm welcome to our talk show, Meet Menaca, celebrating you, episode 130 today. Thank you so much, first of all, for supporting us all this time and hope you're going to continue to support us. Today, we are going to be discussing creating new businesses, do's and don'ts with Mr. Rajendra Theagarajah. We will be going into his expansive career and qualification as much as we can. Today, we are going to be talking about entrepreneurship, but before this, we have spoken about various topics from finance to psychological health to mental well-being to stigma. It is to celebrate each one of you and also to empower you to give a renewed sense of hope. Our mission is very ambitious, that is to touch and inspire 1 million hearts, fostering health, happiness, and hope in each participant. Hoping you all will join us, create this movement to share this message across the continents. So thank you so much once again for being here. First of all, thank you so much for Rajendra for, first of all, suggesting this topic, introducing the speaker to talk about a topic we often don't discuss, at least amongst the South Asian community, the Sri Lankan community, as much as we should, perhaps. So today, we are hoping how to embark on a journey of entrepreneurship or start a business. If someone wants to do that, what you have to do and what you have to avoid. So let's dive deep into the topic of creating new businesses with Mr. Rajendra Theagarajah. Why this speaker and why Mr. Rajendra Theagarajah? His background, he hails from Manipal, Jaffna. He's an alumnus of Royal College, Colombo, fellow of Chartered Accountants in Sri Lanka, Chartered Management Accountants, UK. He has an MBA from Cranfield School of Management. And then his career highlights is quite a lot. So I'm going to mention a few what I think will be helpful. He has a successful banking career in the UK and Sri Lanka, former CEO of 3 major commercial banks in Sri Lanka. Under his leadership, Hatton National Bank was named Retail Bank of the Year for 7 years and Best Bank in Sri Lanka in 2006 and 2012. He has had plenty of leadership roles as a chairman or board member of organizations like the Asian Banks Association, Colombo Stock Exchange, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, and Central Bank of Sri Lanka. He has also had the honor and been conferred the title of Emeritus Chairman by the Asian Banks Association in October 2022. First of all, thank you, Rajendra, for introducing, and thank you, Theagarajah, for joining us. A very warm welcome to you.
Pleasure.
So let's dive deep and discuss this. Firstly, I think even as a professional, having a business for more than almost a couple of decades, when we start about business, often we think about the failure. And I think fear of failure is very common. And you have moved continents, worked in different organizations. How do you think you can handle this?
So fear is definitely a human trait. But my opinion is whether you run a business or even in a professional career in leadership, if you don't have the courage to make mistakes and learn from them, it's not about repeating the mistakes over and over again. Learning from mistakes is something which business school don't teach you. I used to have a mentor, a previous chairman of a bank, which when I was the CEO, who said, "Here, in 10 business decisions, if you make 2 or 3 mistakes, it's a learning process as you don't repeat it. But if you make 8, 9 out of 10 mistakes in decisions, then you have a problem." So I think learning through mistakes is a very important thing. And very often, when you speak to people who are believed to be successful entrepreneurs, either you showcase them for their success or they speak about their success. Very often, a subject which is avoided or not discussed is failure. And I think discussing failure and why one failed and how can one learn from that and avoid making the same mistake moving forward is a very important thing. And it only strengthens you as you go forward. Because the road is not like a even highway. It can always be filled with potholes or,
Thank you so much. So can you give an example? Because we all speak about fear of failure these days, become at least a bit more common outside our community, perhaps. But, like we still strive on success, of course. But I think unless and until we know that, and that kind of gives the belief and the hope, even if you make mistakes, even if you fail in the beginning, you can still turn it around and you can still become successful.
So I'll give you an example. This was before, when I first came back to Sri Lanka in 92, I joined a French bank from the UK, and then I came in initially as a seconded person to Sri Lanka. And that particular bank was based in a building in the main center of Colombo, called the Silinko complex. And in January 1996, it actually got bombed out and wiped out in 22 hours by the people who during the conflict. And within 2 hours, that building was in ashes, it was flames. And the bank which I was acting as a CEO went up. It was on a Wednesday. Thursday and Friday was curfew, weekend going, and on the Monday, there was the building to run, there was in cash, and there was nothing. And all I had was a network of friends and the staff who managed to escape. And you had one corporate customer who came to me over the weekend and said, I can't offer you banking, but I can give you a building in another part of Colombo, just with a concrete shell. And through the networking, without caving in and saying all is done, I managed to get a PABX system for telephones, got a temporary generator to restore power, and a few cabinets, but not 1 cent cash, because all the CEOs of banks around me, none of them were willing to help me because many of them had their own challenges, right? And it was a friend, a Rotarian friend of mine. I'm still involved in the Rotary movement. A guy who came to me on Monday morning when I was actually scratching my head and thinking of a run on the bank. The guy came with a black audit bag with, I think, 8 or 10 million rupees and said, here is some cash. And I said, from where do you bring it? And they said, I knew you will have this problem with no cash. So I went to Bank A on the other side of town and withdrew from my overdraft facility, and I'm pre-settling an import facility for you. So he gave in the money to pre-settle a facility he had taken from me, and I used that 8 or 10 million rupees. There were people queuing up on the road to come in and withdraw. And I think the first, you might laugh at this, I was dispersing through the ATM, 1,000, 2,000 rupees instead of, big amount of money. And I think within about 2 hours, the message got into the bazaar, the local bazaar, that there isn't a run in the bank and there is money. It just calmed the impact and things got stable. And then over the coming week or two, the regulator helped him and we built the bank. But, if I had caved in and said everything is gone and like anybody else said, want to pack up and go back to where I came from, England, I would have let go an entire group of people who relied on me, as well as the headquarters in Paris. So that I would say was one of the hardest things which glared in front of me, and with a group of people took it and then move forward.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think it's so important to know, not to give up. And so many of us, including me, we feel like giving up sometimes. So thank you. The second thing I think I want to address before we go into anything else is the knowledge of technology. In today's world, I think technology has become really vital. So how important do you think technology plays in as a startup or a new business?
So we hear and learn a lot about tech startups and young aspirants getting into the tech space, and that's an ecosystem in itself. But I have two comments to make. The first thing is life is only not about technology, and to me, technology is only an enabler. It is one as a part of a set of tools, and it depends how you make use of it. What's more important is the idea or the what you want to get out of a venture and how perhaps technology can make it more effective, user-friendly, or more productive. And for that, you have other people who are much smarter than you, much more livelier than you, who can play that enabling environment. It's how you make use of it. And the second thing is when people talk about aspiring startups, a lot of the ecosystems tend to say, you need to only be in IT to get into startups. And I completely disagree with that. The principle is an idea and a venture. It can be anything from farming cashew nuts and try to get it into a market, or whether you want to look at people's pain points, say, people who have a dark skin, you want to see doing something about lightening their skin color, what do you do, and as long as you convert an idea into a business or, where, fast food, anything, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be connected with technology. As long as there is a will to do a business and to address a market, it doesn't matter. And this is very relevant when it comes to especially countries like where I come from in Sri Lanka or South Asia, where agri plays a major role, and everybody thinks that's not for startups. But I can give you maybe later on in the session enough examples of how successful entrepreneurship in agriculture has worked as well as is important.
Thank you so much. And I think the other important issue is one set of people say you have to start or create a business very early on. Some people say in the middle, get the experience. So at which point do you think it's best to consider creating a new business, in the lifespan?
There is never a right time to start, or there is never, in terms of age, I don't think there is a right time. In fact, if I give you an example of my own self, I have been trained as a chartered accountant, and I've been in banking for 35 years. And I decided to hang up my gloves about 4 years ago in terms of active executive management. But about 7 years ago, at the twilight of my career, I co-founded 2 startups. And both, one in digital payments and the other one was in what they call analytics and artificial intelligence, for a guy who has never done technology, with one with 4 other guys and the other one with another co-founder, and never looked back. So the age doesn't matter as long as you have a thought process and you're targeting towards a market, and you have the bandwidth to go through that journey. You have what it takes to invest time as well as effort and money. There is never a right time. Many people tend to do it very early in life, especially young kids today, especially more on the tech side, engineering side. They tend to do it today soon after high school or university. And some of the success stories you have heard also in the West Coast, in California, on the tech space, are guys who are university dropouts or boot camping in the back of a garage and just started. But if I give you some examples of our own Sri Lankans, some of the most successful Sri Lankan entrepreneurs who went away after the 80 conflicts to countries like Europe, UK, as well as Canada, the ones who have done very well. I've known housewives who were in Jaffna, who have now got into what we call the millennial circle in companies like Century 21 and Remax, and set up their own real estate brokerage businesses. And I've spoken to some of them and said, if we were where we were, I would have been cooking at home, back home. And because I had to come here due to necessity, I had to work and got into. Some of them who have got into even banking, mainstream banking in Toronto, people who have never before paid themselves, right? My own sister, who was a housewife very early in marriage, got married, was with her husband as an expat in Saudi for so many years, and then when she went to Toronto, she started basically getting into word processing, very elementary element. She went to this government-sponsored tech college, and then she got it. Now she works for the last 20 years in one of the big four Canadian banks, and now she is also involved in a preschool. So there's never a right time, right? And also, it's not confined to a specific segment of community. As long as the mind is there, you can start up. I'm currently involved in the north of Sri Lanka promoting with two entrepreneurs who are probably in their mid to late 40s. These were both guys who did medicine during the conflict period, and they both got caught in during the conflict in the Vani area. And during 2009, they were both taken in. They actually went in, and they spent a few years inside, and then they went through a rehabilitation program. And when they came out, they decided, having gone through all this problem, what is the point in going and doing medicine? And they got into community engagement and care, and they started to experiment on sea cucumber farming. And because of their biomedical background, they understood some of the values of the medicinal and the health value of processing sea cucumber. And today, both these guys have their own nurseries in the islands, in the northern part of Sri Lanka. And I think this year, each of them are harvesting up to 100,000 hatchlings, right? Guys who went into medicine, sweated it, and now they're doing something quite, it's amazing. So it varies. It all is in the mind.
Thank you. I think we all experienced it, or we witnessed other people experience it during the COVID, particularly. How important it is to keep a proper set of accounts and paying taxes as a business. What is your take on it?
So my take on that is the very many people at early stages of business tend to keep 2 sets of books or 3 sets of books. And that's reality. And it will always be there. And to me, at least to have a proper set of books to me is so important, because if you eventually want to approach, you get to a stage of an enterprise, not that day one, you get into day 2, 3 and get into that second, third stage of growth. Either you need the help of a financial establishment like a bank to help you, or even an impact investor or a group of private investors to invest in you. Unless you are able to validate your story with numbers, it's very unlikely that an investor, be it a bank or a private investor, will touch you. So the more you are transparent and the more you show numbers to validate your story, while you will have to pay some taxes, but in the long run or medium to long run, I think you will end up a winner because you will then get exposed to benefiting for a different type of capital. But very often people, either they are oblivious to it or thinking, no, it doesn't matter. We will do what we are doing, and they continue to do so. They continue to go at that same level. But in today's world, the ones who have done, I think, pretty well are people who are able to demonstrate. And this is one thing, but at the same time, if I take entrepreneurship away, if I give you another example, during the conflict in the last 2, 3 decades, and this is, I'm sure, not only unique to Sri Lanka, but also in other parts of the emerging world, very often there is connect between, say, a person who is living or working, say, in London or in Toronto or Germany, and they have dependents back home. So they send money, and that goes either through two routes. It goes through the formal banking system, or it can go through a money transfer agent like Wise Money or Western Union or whoever it is, regulated. Or it goes through what I call the monkey route, which is the informal route. And I recall very often, I think during the post-2009 era, there was a time when there was a lot of interest in rebuilding homes in parts of Colombo and some of the other cities by dependents of Tamil-speaking people who have been outside the world, right? Outside. And very often, people did not have a record of banking history relationship. Go to a bank to say, I want a housing loan. Here is my income. I need to take 50-60% of the value of a property as a housing loan. You see, a bank will not touch you if you don't have a route. And I still remember going to metro cities like Toronto, Montreal, even coming to UK and Zurich. At that time, as a local bank CEO, explaining to groups of our community on the importance of sending it through the formal route so that there is an audit trail of your earnings and what you're sending here. So when you eventually decide either it's for yourself or your mother, father, uncle, nephew, they want to establish to start a business or to get a loan, there is a trail in a formal relationship for a bank to consider you. So I think there is no shortcut, but in the long run, it pays to be having a proper set of books.
Thank you. The other important thing perhaps is overlooked is obtaining insurance cover when you start a new business.
Very important. Very, very important. And when you say insurance, very often people say it's a pain. You had to insure, nothing will happen. Either from a personal point of view, nothing is going to happen to me. I am 30, I will live up to 70, nothing will happen. Or, okay, I'm living in an area not in the mountains, there's not going to be an earthquake, nothing to worry. But you never know when a natural disaster will hit you, or whether an actual robbery can affect your business, or whether you can actually succumb. Your life you can pass away. And if I look at some of the micro entrepreneurs, especially in businesses in rural places or even farming, very often it is the single person who is the main driver of the business. And there is a policy known as what they call key man insurance cover, so that if the person either dies or becomes permanently disabled where they are not able to do the business, whatever financing they have taken from a bank gets settled without an incremental burden on the dependents and the family. So it's absolutely important that one thinks of those things. You don't think it happens to you, right? And the same way, very often, the people who have I think, have suffered in the in the last few years, and in the last 2 years in particular. You and I have seen the impact of global warming and climate change everywhere. Only just before this session started, we were talking about weather. And, for people who are running agri-businesses or, businesses in, markets, if there is rain and customers don't come, either your crops and your produce can get affected, but also you have something called business disruption, right? And if you don't take the proper cover to get yourself insured against business disruption, then when you want to continue, you have a problem. I'll give you a very good example of a hotel chain in Colombo which benefited from this. If those of you know this hotel called Cinnamon Lakeside, which used to be the old Ramada or the Transasia, there was an air attack on a building adjacent to it during the conflict period, and this hotel was damaged, right? And it took a long time for them to renovate, right? But a lot of the renovation to what it stands today was done with the right insurance claim, not out of fire. The business insurance cover for a loss of business, because those guys were proper advice and insured themselves against loss of business cover. They were able to literally rehabilitate that hotel from the proceeds from that. So one never knows, however small you are or however large you are, look at the importance of insurance. And if you don't understand, always ask somebody who is an insurance broker to give you free advice of what are the possibilities and get some kind. Today, you don't have to worry if I take an insurance premium, for certain types of cover. I'm paying for 1 year and I don't have to. For example, you're taking a vehicle cover and you say, okay, I'm keeping this vehicle. Half the time I'm traveling around the world, or I only, use it for 1/3 of the year. The rest of the time it's in the garage. Now, unlike say previously where you would have taken pay for the premium for the whole year, whether you drive or don't drive, it's inside. But now you have this thing, pay as you go. So there are new insurance covers, smart new entrepreneur, what they call insurtech companies have come up with these policies. Said you pay as you go. So every time you take the vehicle out, there is a way it records the fact that you're going out and you pay. So there are different models now coming out, but always ask. It's always important to find out what sort of cover is suitable for you and look at that.
Thank you so much. The next important thing, I think, often the lack of bank financing is usually what people say for not starting or able to sustain a business. So what are the other options available for, as you mentioned before, like micro entrepreneurs or SMEs or aspiring entrepreneurs?
So before I get into the outlets, I think I'd like to say, very often people say, these banks will not hold an umbrella when there is a wet day. And very often people all over the world will say banks are not there to help small people. One thing you have to understand is, I'm talking about commercial banks, right? Not investment banks. A bank is mainly funded through the deposits they take from people like you and me, right? So there is a fundamental fiduciary responsibility to protect the interest of the depositor, right? So when you lend, you have to also make sure that you take the right sort of precautions and you lend not as a cowboy, but you lend judiciously. So often, for the reasons that we just discussed, if the right set of accounts are not there, or if the right insurance is not there, or if the mindset of the entrepreneur is a one track and not willing to listen, often there's a disconnect between the entrepreneur's expectation and the bank's tolerance and the willingness. So that becomes an issue. So one has to understand that this is not charity money or money just coming from plucking from the tree. But also, yes, more often than ever, it is not that easy for startup businesses to do so. So then you have, it doesn't have to, you don't need to get put off. Often I have come across smart, courageous entrepreneurs using different sources. Often friends and family is always been a case of a good source of funding, as long as the entrepreneur is honest, they can demonstrate that they are hardworking and there is integrity. If that is there, always, I think community of friends and family has been always a tried and tested mechanism of getting at least initially to get them started. And then now you get a whole set of other sources also available if you look wide enough, right? Impact funds they are all over the world. We can talk a bit more about that. If I look at, say, Sri Lanka per se, about 8, 9, 10 years ago, there was this network of impact investors who form under one umbrella called the Lanka Impact Investor Forum, Lanka Impact Investor Network. And they were focusing on a particular area, entrepreneurship, who were trying to address social issues or environmental issues, right? And they set up two funds. One was the Social Enterprise Fund, and the other one was, I think, a Social Infrastructure Fund. And from where you are, you would have heard of the two programs called Shark's Tank and Dragon's Den, right?
Yes.
So the Sri Lankan equivalent of a smaller version started almost, I think, 10 years ago. It started under the name At-Paura, ATH, At-Paura. You know, At stands for Atta. It's a part of Atta is the singular version equivalent of an elephant. So I was involved in this startup, this framework, right? And when we discussed the name with the initial group of entrepreneurs, it was felt that using the word shark or a dragon was too harsh for a market like Sri Lanka. So we said, let's look at the gentle elephant, and we will, the protection of the elephant, and we looked at Paura. And if I'm not mistaken, it was very new to Sri Lanka. We got in one of the two state television agencies which came as a sponsor to broadcast and do the recording. I think they got in a whole series of accounting firms, legal firms, and also the initial 10 impact investors. I was one of the 10. We put in a modest amount of money that time, I think $1 million each. I think they started that with 10 million rupees initially. I'm talking about 10 years ago. And we went through a whole mentoring process for about, I think, 2-3 months and distilled from all over the country. And they brought the last 10 shortlisted guys through, I think, 4-5 weekend face-to-face, the equivalent of Dragon's Den, the interview process where you had 4 impact investors like judges going through the Q&A process. And they selected these, I think there were 6 of them who were identified for investment. And if I'm not mistaken, one person fell within the first 3 months. But the other 5 have continued, and if I'm not mistaken, they are all continuing. Some of them have gone into become MSMEs, some of them have gone to a different level, got into banking relationships, and it has worked. So that was a good example of a social impact investment funds to be tapped. And now it's happening from all sides. The Canadian government came to Sri Lanka about 3-4 years ago through this NGO called WUSC, World University Service of Canada. The Canadian ODA came in and said they want to set this up to connect Canadian diaspora who wanted to get in here with the support of the Canadian government, but they wanted a mechanism. So they work now with Lampa Impact Investor Network and another incubator called Hatch. And they are focusing, it's a 7-year program, where they will build capacity of entrepreneurs, mainly in the northern province, to build them up and take them to a certain level. And that whole, from mentorship to development and also seed funding, has started. So there are funds like this which are more either localized, regional, or even from everywhere else available. It's about now tapping. In relation to, say, 10-20 years ago, there is enough information available to tap these sources.
Thank you.
And actually, if I say something,
Sure.
I'm aware of one particular medical entrepreneur, a hospital, the guy who is operating a hospital. And this guy started, for sensitivity purposes, I will not mention the hospital, but it's actually in the northern province of Sri Lanka. This entrepreneur took literally a hospital which was run by a missionary movement, which has been in Sri Lanka for centuries, and it was almost closed down. And he had this idea of reviving it and starting. It started very small, and then after a certain period, when he had to build up the lab facilities and improve the OPD and the capacity, the network which helped him were all family and friends from Australia, UK, Europe, and I believe today he has settled those guys over about 5-6 years, and now he is ready to do his next phase, which is to go up to about 100-room hospital now. This is a guy who started from literally nothing in the province. So again, if you tap the right sort of people and demonstrate commitment, passion, and integrity, there is always the possibility.
Thank you. You touched upon like Shark or Dragon's Den. So we are hearing about acceleration programs, and can you explain what is meant by? I watch Dragon's Den all the time, but not everyone perhaps is clear about what really happens in these accelerator programs. Would you mind?
Sure. So very often when there is also a confusion between two words, accelerator and incubator, and there's a slight difference, right? Before I get to accelerator, let me explain about the incubator. An incubator is an ecosystem where you have a group of investors, either institutional or individuals, who are looking for ideation. They look at ideas and they want to support sponsoring ideas. Now, in the ideas, very often you don't, the sponsors don't give money. What they are willing to do is they will give premises, space to come and work or experiment. They will give their benefit of their network to connect people. They will bring in groups of experts, previous entrepreneurs to give mentorship programs. And often that will work for a certain period. And in exchange for a part of the ownership of the idea, if it becomes a success. But they take also a risk. If it fails, it fails. So that's very early stage. That's what you have called an incubator. And also you have in the western part of the world, especially in Canada and maybe parts of UK as well, you have even some of the universities which have incubators. For example, in Toronto, you have Ryerson, which is one of the most aggressive incubators in the entire North America, which focuses on early stage ideation straight after university. So that's one. But very important to understand, very often, more likely than not, you will not get funding. It's only the resources and the network and the challenging, validating an idea. But then, once you get to the slightly more mature level of an idea, when you want to scale up a startup, you have this accelerator. Accelerator is actually like pressing the accelerator of a vehicle. You actually want to give that burst of insulin to fast track the business to take it to a different level. So it's often a period of a program which is designed to give that additional level of energy, ranging between 3 to 6 months often. But there are a couple of qualifications. You need to have a minimum viable product already developed. An idea of product should be already developed, and now you want to push it up. Secondly, there must be a team, however small it is, a permanent team, not part-timers, who are willing to invest their time and commitment. And thirdly, it is also very, very intense. So one needs to, if you're working part-time and trying to do something, or if you're already doing something, you need to be able to devote yourself and invest a significant amount of your time in that 3 to 6 month period to benefit from the program. Now, if I give you just a couple of examples, in the last few weeks, the USAID program worked with the Lanka Agripreneurs Forum, and they went through a very successful accelerator program. I think they looked at maybe 3-4 dozen agribusinesses which had already had a minimum viable product, and they came through this. They shortlisted, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 10. But I went for the show, and they put them through again. I think it was a 9 or 10 week program, very intensive program. And on the last day, they have what they call a demo day, a day of demonstration, where they invited the 10 to come in front of a closed door, where they invited people, institutional as well as individual impact investors, where these guys pitch whatever they have learned and how they are planning to accelerate. And in that demo day, there is an opportunity for the ask, for you to say, yes, now I'm ready to jump or grow. This is my ask for the next 2 years or 1 year. And that is where very often you will have investors who will turn back and say, fine, I will take 20% of your business. How much do you want? So it's in exchange for the money you're asking for seed funding to get to the next level, you get a part of equity. So that is what you mean by acceleration. And there are enough also global programs. And if I give you another example, if you Google, Draper is he's a billionaire entrepreneur from the West Coast. And Draper has his own TV show where he goes around the world and shortlists these successful accelerators. And you will be wondering, why would he look at a small country like Sri Lanka, being in California? The guy came about a year ago, Sri Lanka. I met him, right? And Sri Lanka, I think they shortlisted about 6 MVP companies which had gone through the accelerator, along with Bangladesh, India, and I think Pakistan as part of a South Asian thing. And the most successful company was going to get $1 million of seed funding. And I know 3 Sri Lankan companies got into the final show, the Draper show. And even if you don't get the first prize, the exposure is you get into millions of audience on a show to get there. So that is the sort of exposure I think some of these participating in these accelerators benefit.
Thank you so much. People who come in Dragon's Den, we have seen them flourish, and we see their products in our regular supermarkets and everywhere, how far they have gone. Some of them have really, really done well. So I'm sure they are very, very helpful. Thank you.
For this compliance, because you touch on the word compliance, I'll tell you it's absolutely important not to jump into a business without realizing, especially if you're in food or pharmaceuticals.
And
Now, there
healthcare.
is a big case going on here at the moment in our country where somebody who supported and endorsed this skin whitening lotion or whatever it is, and now there is a whole issue of not getting the national medical registration certification. I'm also aware of a very successful group of peanut farmers who work with a peanut processing exporter. When they initially got into exporting from locally distributing, the first time when they got into Europe, or when they got orders from, I think, Germany, they didn't realize that there was a EU legislation. In peanuts, when you extract peanuts, there's this thing called aflatoxin, right? It's a particular type of, I think, enzyme. And you cannot have more than 1 or 2%, which is the tolerance. And I think the initial consignments which came to EU had about 8 or 9%, and they got rejected. So you fund it, you put all your heart and soul, you're not mindful of compliance, and then what happens? Bam. Of course, in that particular case, they benefited from a EU grant. Because of the buyer from EU, they subsequently got a grant, help these people to go and do R&D research and then come back and fight it. But the problem is be mindful of compliance. Very important.
Thank you. I think one last question I want to ask is, how can banks assist the micro startup entrepreneurs because usually we think if it's bank, it's loans. Is there anything else happens? Because I know at least in the UK now, the Barclays or NatWest, they have their own programs to support people.
Absolutely. So one is their own programs, but I think more than money, very often it is the mentoring as well as hand-holding, not for a short period. And remember, the real impact is when you start from down zero and going through a whole life cycle, the bank, you will, I mean, that's the importance of defending and retaining a relationship. If I give from my 35 years experience of maybe 2 examples, both which of entrepreneurs who went through the conflict, pre-conflict period and post-conflict, right? There was there was an entire village in the north central part of the country, which were paddy farmers, growing paddy to mill rice and sell rice. But in that part of the world, there is a mismatch between the large supply of farmers and the very small suppliers of rice millers who buy that paddy, process it, mill it into rice or flour, and sell. And very often, the smaller you are as a smaller scale farmer, you take a long time to recover and you have a problem. And the particular bank I was running at that time was also focused on micro entrepreneurship. And I remember my microfinance team went into that village. I think they had about 200 villagers who were into paddy farming from half an acre, 1 acre to 2 acres. Very small scale, right? Literally all were in bank loans, and also literally every one of them was entrapped to the village shop owner who was like the Mudalali for informal loans. So whatever they make also is going over there, right? So one of the team leads, the micro person, came back to us and said, these guys will never come out of paddy if they're rich, right? But what they didn't realize is every one of them, unlike an urban city, had a quarter of an acre of land with the house. And this young agri graduate, whom I still know and meet, went to the village and he picked about 4 or 5 initially, not the 200, and said, why don't you start to grow in your home garden, a small home garden? And I don't know whether you know this little flower, this plant called bougainvillea.
Yeah.
Right? It's a home thing, right?
Yeah.
And they started with, I think, 5 or 6 of the households. We did this home garden. And when they did that initially, they wanted to connect them with the Colombo-based, the big flower shops. They said, come and take. And they were willing to do it. But they said, look, we can't send our lorries all the way 100 kilometers to pick from 5-6 guys. To bring it and come to us. And that became prohibitive in terms of logistics and transport. So over about another 6 months to a year, the bank team really went into the village. One village, one product, right? They didn't disturb the paddy farming, but they managed to convince about 90% of the 200 families and said, you are not losing anything. Do your paddy farming, but in your small home plot, grow bougainvillea. And after about a year and a half, you literally had the entire village growing bougainvillea. And then we were able to connect the top 2-3 exporters who export to the Amsterdam market here. Every day you have a air shipment which goes to the Amsterdam market, right? Connecting from that village over there. And I can tell you, I have visited this village after about 3 years. And if I tell you, from the initial hut, not even seeing a tuk-tuk, right? I actually, after 3 years, I've seen huts being converted into 2-3 room bricks and mortar bungalows. From a bungalow, from nothing into a tuk-tuk, people who had a tuk-tuk having actually bolero vehicles over 3-4 years. So how the prosperity has increased. And now most of those homes are having their own solar panel roofs generating electricity. Now that's lifestyle progression by substituting or getting a new idea to complement your initial idea, but the idea came from the bank. And the bank actually was willing to finance that particular product because it was linked to grow to market. So it's not always that banks don't support. You actually have, and getting that sort of mentorship is as or more important than just getting a loan.
Thank you so much. I think we are almost at the end of the show. First of all, thank you so much for being generous and coming and joining us and giving us some insight. Is there anything, of course, you are the guru of entrepreneurship. So let me ask you this. What do you think about this talk show? Any suggestions, any feedback for us?
I certainly enjoyed the show. My thought process is, I think maybe rightly or wrongly, I focus the conversation in English. But I think if we are focusing on South Asia and also Sri Lanka, I'm sure there are quite a few people who may not be comfortable in speaking in English. So maybe some sort of a translation process, or it might help, because there is also enough entrepreneurship where language is a barrier. So that may also be of some use. That's the only thing I would say.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely take that on board. And I'm sure Rajendra is keenly listening and will be coming back on the 1st of September on Sunday. I think we are going to be talking about conflict resolution. And I think it's so important on our personal lives, professional lives, and it's with Seema. And I think, personally, I do think it's a very important topic once again. Now, over to Rajendra to give the vote of thanks, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a very important topic. We have been thinking about doing this for a while, but now we came across the right person and did it. Businesses drive the economy, right? So it's key on a macroeconomic level and also on a personal level. If most of you would have or might have seen Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and he clearly states the true financial independence comes from running a business, not by working for the others, right? Please note, I'm not saying that you should not work for the others, and this is the only way to live a life, because a person's definition of success and this personal circumstance, expectations are different. So there is room for everyone. But if you want to be financially successful, this is the only way. So financial independence. He also goes on to state that there is a total lack of financial education. That's one of the reasons people don't get into this as well. So we've been trying to do this for some time, and it's very important. And another aspect I want to touch upon is these programs are being recorded, and these go to a library. So this is going to be a reference place. So in YouTube as well as Facebook, these are reference sites. People will be able to come back to and look at it. It's not just for the people who are attending right now, it's for the benefit of the larger community as a whole. So that's that. Then I think Menaca has already said enough about Rajendra Theagarajah. I call him Thea, so excuse me if I refer to him as Thea from time to time. He's a well-known business leader in Sri Lanka. There is no question. You mentioned his name, most of the business leaders would know him anyway, right? And not only that, he also is a regular panelist on the economy and the related subjects. So when I realized he was here, the one with that background and the one with has got not only his own business experience, also have seen the other business as bank manager, would have seen. And I thought that was the right person to do this, and we got it. A couple of things I wanted to mention about what Menaca said to add to that. First thing, Thea was a CEO of a bank. That in itself is an achievement, right? Getting to be a CEO. But not only that, he was there for a long period of time. So the stickability, the perseverance was there. So that means a lot more to me. Getting there is important, but also being there for a long time, that's important. And also under his leadership, the bank became recognized as the Retail Bank of the Year for 7 years. And for 2 years, his bank was the best bank in Sri Lanka for 2 years. So he has achieved a lot. And I'm so pleased to have had him here today and for him to spare his time and give us the benefit of his wisdom. So let's play this record back to whoever is going to listen to it, and they will really benefit from this. So thank you, Thea, for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. I have to thank a few other people. The audience. I said this is for the larger audience, the community, but also having the audience there and their participation, immediate feedback, interaction, they motivate the team. That's what motivates team, keep the team going. So that's very important as well. So thank you, audience, for being here with us. Well, having said the team, it's important to thank every one of them. I want to mention their names. Some of them are not here today. It's Rohan Mehra, Swati Panwa, Vani Anandarajan, Raj Madhavan. He's always there from Canada at 4 o'clock in the morning for him. Then Tara Shanmuganathan, young Tara is here too. And Suja Correa, Nikki Chandana, and Dr. Shamini. So thank you, team. And lastly, but not leastly, the person who ran the show, Menaca. She does an awful lot of preparation behind the scene. And so that she's prepared when she comes to the interview to ask the right questions. And also she remains focused. She doesn't go off tangent. So we stick to the lines. And also she separates the wheat from chaff. and teases out the key points that are required. So that's very important, and you did a great job. Thank you, Menaca. And I would leave with the last 2 points. There were 2 points that Pia mentioned that are very important. One is age. When do you start the business? Age is irrelevant. I know of a 15-year-old guy. He's the first person to import the two-wheel scooters people are running around in. The 15-year-old guy, he got imported from USA, and he became a multimillionaire, right? I may have got the age wrong by a couple of years or so, but he's very young. Then the other is failure. Don't shy away from failing. You may fail, but don't do it twice. But on that basis, I would say one chap called Ross Perot, he was my boss at one time. He failed 54 times before he won the first IT facilities management contract. And then he became a billionaire. So failure shouldn't stop anyone. Okay. With that, I conclude, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Raj. I think the other person who talks about failure or recent years is Stephen Bartlett. I'm sure, Raj, you have seen, might be Rajendra, you have also know. He's also part of Dragon's Den now. He's only 32 years old, but he started as a school dropout, I think, early on, as if I'm not wrong. And he has this podcast called Diary of the CEO. I would highly recommend. I know I should be promoting mine, but it is interesting. And for a person like that, he was a headline speaker in the British Dental Association conference. So, it shows from where to where people can go with perseverance and resilience and dedication. I think it's so important. So thank you so much for, first of all, suggesting this topic, right? It's really important, I think. And I think it's come to that time. I think our community or South Asian community should embrace entrepreneurship, because usually it is, I often say, you're a doctor, engineer, accountant, solicitor, or nothing. It's gone are those days. I think it's high time we grow up and think about this seriously. So thank you so much. And thank you so much. It's really, really important topic. And, we couldn't have got a better speaker to come and share this knowledge. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for everybody who is on Facebook and supporting us. And hopefully you can join us in September. Reiterating what Raj said, and I'm going to ask you, only request we can ask is, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel called Meet Menaca, because more subscribers, data does matter, whether we like it or not, and we will be able to go and get better speakers, more important topics to discuss. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you after the summer holiday. Till we see you in September, stay safe, be happy, and keep smiling.